Hello, I'm Jeff Scheidock, Dean of Students at Calvin Theological Seminary, and recently I was honored to host a conversation between Mark Braverman and Gary Burge about Israel and Palestine and about the ongoing violence in Gaza. Mark Braverman is a Jewish American with family roots in Israel. He's a retired clinical psychologist. He serves as the executive director of Kairos USA, a movement to unify and mobilize American Christians to work for a just peace in Israel and Palestine. Gary Burge is an adjunct professor of New Testament here at Calvin Theological Seminary, and he's an expert on the integration of theology and politics in the Middle East. It's difficult to talk about Israel and Palestine, about Gaza and Hamas, and the events that are going on today. In this part of their conversation, Mark and Gary give us guidance on how to talk about this situation with truth and in ways that express hope.
Mark, help me. I'm thinking about those who may be listening, and a lot of pastors, seminarians. How do we talk about this? What do we name this? I heard you say, hey, don't call what happened on October 7th and what's been going on a war. How do we talk about this? How do we engage a conversation with someone in our congregation or others?
So there are two things. One is you have to educate people about the facts and about the historical context. You have to help them try to begin to see, even though what Hamas did in October was horrific and I won't say inexcusable. You have to understand where it's coming from. These people did not do this out of enmity for Israel and hatred of Jews. They did it because they have nothing else to lose and they want to die on their feet. That's what's happening. They know we are being, if I were from Gaza, I would say, we are being annihilated. We are being exterminated. And I, as a Jew, understand what that feels like, even though, thank God, it didn't happen to me, but it happened 1 degree of separation from me. We are being annihilated. And like the fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto, fighting Nazi Germany, fighting the Wehrmacht, we're going to get on our feet, we're going to throw whatever we have at them, and we're going to die on our feet with some dignity. That's what people need to understand. And they need then to understand, well, how did it come to that? It came to that because this liberation project of Jews to have their own state and to live as free people in their own land, which is how the national anthem goes, involved the ethnic cleansing of an indigenous population. And nobody knows that history. There's a whole mythology that has it backwards. You start with that. You start with the facts. Then you go to the theological issues. Well, okay, but the promises and the Bible and what God wants and the book of Joshua. Don't the Jews get to do that? It's too bad for the Canaanites, but they're not the chosen people. In Gaza, from Zephaniah, but Gaza will be leveled. And then you have to ask people to take a good long look at their hermeneutic and at their theology and say, this is the 21st century. We are Reformed Christians. We're supposed to be responding to the history of the day. And what does the Bible tell us about that? And sometimes it's not easy and it gets complicated, right? And sometimes we don't have to take the Bible literally. And those promises to Abraham were important. And they were the beginning of a powerful, important narrative that changed human history. But that was then. And when Ben-Gurion decided, and his gang decided to name the new state Israel, they knew what they were doing because they wanted people to conflate, to confuse the state of Israel today with the Israelites of the Bible. They wanted people to identify Judaism with Zionism and say that they are the same. And I am here to tell you, as a Jew, that I am not an Israelite from the Bible. I'm probably not even, I'm not descended from the Jews who were exiled from Palestine in 70. I'm descended from a Caucasian tribe that was converted in the 8th century, but never mind, okay? And my Judaism is not ethnic nationalism. And my God, as Michael Pryor, the Catholic priest, who did some time in Bethlehem and learned about those things, and he was Irish, said, "My God is not God the ethnic cleanser. I disavow the book of Joshua. And if that causes questions about the promises to Abraham, so be it. Let's ask those questions, but let's ask the questions. And let's struggle with that. And let's live in the here and now and try to be faithful to God. And let's, as Jews, as Americans, as Christians, as anybody, follow the teachings of this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, who was a Jewish reformer and was speaking out and against the theocracy of his time, which he said we're going against the will of God. He said, destroy the temple. Do you realize what that meant? Well, you obviously you see where it got him, right? And it was his own people who said to the Romans, yeah, can you help us? Can you get rid of this guy for us? Again, that's considered anti-Semitic to say that the Jews killed Jesus, because it has resonances, horrible resonances from the deicide charge. But if you go back to the historical context, I'm sorry, friends, that's what happened. Because Jesus' own people saw him as a political threat because they were in with Rome and it was working for them. You know, that's the whole theocratic class. Yeah. And he was exiled as a political prisoner. It doesn't say Jesus Christ heretic. It says Jesus Christ King of the Jews. Right? If he's the king, then who's the emperor? Right? And he on purpose chose words for himself and names for himself that were riffing off of names that were called the emperor. So he was sacrificed as a political, seditious man. That's the historical context, and it leads directly to what we're seeing today. It's interesting, fascinating, and tragic how closely Palestine of the 20th century and the late 20th century echoes what was happening in that first century.
This was one part of the conversation between Mark and Gary. If you'd like to hear more, you can click on the next part of the conversation, or you can click on the full conversation.